This episode of Behind the Regs is sponsored by Plan Checker. Plan Checker is a UK-based digital platform designed to connect clients with verified building control and construction professionals, making it easier to find the right expertise at the right time for the right job. It doesn't replace building control bodies and it doesn't carry out restricted activities or functions. It simply creates clearer, more transparent access to the professionals working across the industry. If you're a professional, a client, or part of the wider built environment sector, you can learn more or sign up at planchecker.co.uk.
Building safety is one of those areas where everyone agrees the stakes are high, but very few people would describe the system as clear. You're listening to Behind the Regs podcast. I'm Jack, and my co-host Nada is joining me, along with Gareth Grimes.
Yeah,
Gents.
we talk a lot on this podcast about regulation, responsibility, and interpretation. But today's conversation is about clarity, not shortcuts, not sound bites, but genuinely helping people understand what is expected of them.
Our guest today, Gareth, has spent years working across the construction industry and building safety, and has taken a very deliberate approach to explaining complex regulation in plain language.
Gareth, first of all, welcome to Behind the Regs, and I'll hand over to Jack. He'll start to get into the nitty-gritty.
Thank you both for having me.
No
Spot
problem.
on. Before we get into all the detail, Gareth, if you'd like to give the listeners a bit of a background on yourself, how you got into the industry, your career to date, and what sort of led you into building safety.
Thanks both. My name's Gareth Grimes. I'm director of Cloth Banks. And what led me to the industry is quite a simple thing. As a child, my family owned and operated demolition companies and a scrapyard in Liverpool. And my summer holidays were always about being out on site or in the scrapyard. In those days, health and safety wasn't really something that was managed as rigorously as it is today. At the age of 16, I joined the Navy. I was medically discharged due to an injury. And my resettlement was then into the building or the built environment. So I've been in construction now for well over 26 years, and I've conducted various roles from project management, building schools, hospitals, to project directing high-rise buildings in Dubai. Lots of different multifunctional buildings. I've worked for DIO, which is Defence Infrastructure Organisation, so I've delivered military establishments. And what led me into this building safety arena was I was working for a huge PBSA, which is purpose-built student accommodation, who are extremely asset rich. I won't mention them because there's lots of things happening in the background with regards to them. And my role was to identify the risks that the assets faced due to a fire that happened in Bolton in a student accommodation. So this was all pre-PAS 9980. That's what led me into this arena in 2019 and operating within the arena and helping various entities understand complex legislation, understand what they must do, what's a nice to have, and has led me to this point in my career, obviously being a director of Cloth Banks, which is a multifunctional consultancy doing building control, fire, and also building safety advisory, which is that gap between building control and fire. Building control officers used to be able to give you advice on how to achieve compliance, but it was always their interpretation. That's now been removed, and the grey area is now being filled with past RBIs and people who are experts and helping people, fill the void. So that's a brief synopsis about myself.
Thank you very much, Gareth. That's really helpful context, to be fair, to start setting the scene for our episode. And it's quite an interesting journey we've had so far. Obviously, we're here to learn more and hear more about that.
Thanks for that, Gareth. One of the first questions to go with then, you've been very clear that simplification is important to you and, well, a lot of people in the industry, not as a shortcut, but as a way of making regulation usable. Why do you think building safety has become so difficult for people to understand in the first place?
Well, I think it's not just building safety. It's the word safety that's become very complex understanding for people. What people, as soon as you mention the word safety, they think health and safety. Well, building safety is part of that. And one thing I've observed, whether it's on a construction site where you're trying to manage health and safety risks, working at height, all these other complex things like pure and things like that, which is provisional use of working equipment regs, there's lots and lots of language. And when you're dealing with humans and human behavior, the easiest way to get somebody to do something is go, this is what you must do, and this is the reason behind it, and this is the consequence if you don't. It is that simple. What people tend to get baffled by is the language. Now, if you study the English language, if you move a comma in a word, it can change the total meaning of that word. So sometimes people misinterpret what the written word is asking of them. So what my focus has been, as well as trying to do my day job, is to take away the ambiguity, make it very simple. This is why, as the responsible person, you must do this. And it's about life safety. And this is how you get to that point. You can't discharge your duties, but you can bring in help by way of experts, consultants, etc., etc. So if you paint that pathway, it makes people's lives easier and it allows them to make easier, quicker decisions. What we've got to try and do is move away from the ostrich burying his head in the sand because he doesn't know where to go. One entity saying you've got to do this. I read the law and it's telling me I've got to do that. But what's the answer? Well, somewhere in the middle is the correct answer. So that's why I focus on that simplification, to try and just give people a little bit more clarity on what they can do. So when it comes to a decision, do I need Jack to do a risk assessment for me? What does the law state? What do I know? Yes, I do. I can make that decision instead of making no decision, because lots of people are just standing on the spot, jumping up and down. They're not moving forward. They're not moving backwards because they simply don't know the way of travel. So that's why I try and focus and help on that simplification journey.
Do you think complexity is accidental or systemic?
It's by design. And the reason it's by design is because that is the metaphoric rope to hang yourself with. That's what the legal system is all about. It's that interpretation of the written language. That's how cases are built based on a precedent from a past legal argument, etc. So it is. It's by design, which is why many moons ago, early 90s, the Idiot's Guide of whatever, you can get it for Excel, or the Idiot's Guide to how to put shelves up in your house, whatever the case may be. That's why there's a very big market for that, because a lot of people, that it's not that they're not intelligent enough to understand it, because that's not fair. Intelligence is different for everybody else. Interpretation and perception is different for everyone. That's what makes us a very complex organism, being human. You might look at the colour red and you think it's blood red. I look at it and say, well, it's actually pink. Neither one of us is right or wrong. It's just our interpretation of it. So, it's by design, Jack, in my perception anyway.
Yeah, I think that is one of the big factors for where regulation becomes interpretation, and then the legal complexities and subsequent communication failures within it. Do you think using your ebooks could simplify those understanding those features and how things could be interpreted a bit more easier and easier to sort of understand and actually do processes?
I hope so. That was always my aim. All of my ebooks are free. The only thing that I've ever charged a fee for is a hard copy of my Simplifying Building Safety, because it costs me to print, and actually I make no money on them. What I charge for that book is the print cost and the packaging postage, so I make no money. That's, it's not a profit thing. So, in answering the question, I'd hope so. What I hope that each ebook achieves is a basic level of understanding of what the legislation, the code, the article, etc., is asking of you in a specific role. So, responsible person. I'm about to release an ebook today on my LinkedIn, which is the simplifying the roles and responsibilities of the responsible person, to arm that individual, because there's lots of overlap and lots of clashing starting to happen in regards to the principal appointed person, the appointed person. They're all different roles under different regulations. One's under the Building Safety Act and one is under Regulatory Reform Order. So lots of people are like, well, I'm a PAP. Does that make me the responsible person? I'm the responsible person. Does that make me the PAP? So by defining it in a clear sense, hopefully gives people clarity on what they must and must not do under those specific roles.
We will touch on those roles a bit later on,
Yeah.
so I don't want to cut you
I
off.
don't want to
But
cross over. I appreciate that.
we've got a few interesting questions to follow up with
So
those roles
hopefully
in
my
particular.
ebooks give people in simple terms, simplification terms, an understanding of what's being asked of them or somebody else. And as I say, once you've got let's talk about football. Everyone watches football, and we're all like, yes, our team's winning, Salah scored an hat-trick, whatever sort of thing. What we don't necessarily see is the complexity behind it, of why he's made that run, why he's playing in that position, because somebody else is looking at the devil in the detail and coming up with ways of dealing that. If you were to go into football coaching, you'd have to have a simple knowledge of football. What's football all about? It's about scoring goals. It's a team game, all those different things. So you would have to start on a baseline, have that foundation. Then if you want to understand more complexities around it, then hopefully some of my publications can lead people down a specific, more nuanced role within that arena. You may have new people who are entering, there's a huge recruitment shortage within construction overall, let alone within fire engineering and fire safety. You'll get a very pliable mind straight out of university, straight out of school, who'll go, I don't know what I want to do. And they've got an aptitude and a very cognitive way of looking at safety, for instance. And the book might help them go, I want to learn more about that. It might not. As I say, there's no defined audience. All I'm trying to do is go, look, this is what we've all got to do. And if we all do it together as a collective, the industry as a whole will become a better, more robust place to work within. And we can have proper conversations instead of he who shouts loudest is right. That's an ego reaction.
So back to the roles, Gareth. You've obviously spoken earlier about the roles and who's been affected, and what we really want to understand from your position, and from what you've seen so far. Who would you say is the most affected when things aren't clearly explained? Is it the professionals, like the registered building inspectors, the fire engineers, the architects, or is it the duty holders, or is it the residents? Who do you think from your experience so far with all the changes throughout the past couple of years, who has been the most affected?
Well, the most affected is the end user. It's the Mr. and Mrs. Miggins in their bed, lying asleep in a HRB and paying their rent, paying their mortgage. They've been the most impacted by any of the regulatory change, and past experiences of will give you the reasons behind that Grenfell and other fires that have happened. What's interesting, and it's something that you can go away and look at on my LinkedIn. I did a timeline of fires going back to the 80s. We're actually having more residential fires in this half. But if you look at the building regs change, building regs have been getting better, but fires are happening more and more, which tells you that there's something else in the background. A big part of it is the cutting back on firefighter resource and things like that. So residents, ultimately, they've felt it in lots of different ways. One is from a regulatory perspective on what landlords and building owners should have been doing over this period of time to make sure that they're safe. And then you've also got the impact of some people not being able to sell their properties because there's now a need to justify the fire safety of the facade via a PAS 9980 assessment and also an EWS1 certificate. And then the next knock-on effect of that is the people who are in charge of that asset. So the responsible person. It's been around, the regulatory reform order changed in 2005. It's been around for a long time and there's defined roles and responsibilities there. But my open question is, how many of those roles and responsibilities are just being pandered to, not being completed properly because there is a financial pressure on the individual or the entity to get bums in beds rather than maintain and things like that. There's one thing I've learned in my career, and I served nearly 6 years in the civil engineering sector for a water authority in the wastewater side of things. And they had a systemic problem with reacting to problems, which makes it 14 times more expensive to deal with a problem instead of being proactive. Well, when you convert that into now modern day, looking at assets, going and doing surveys for clients, PAPs, on fire doors, etc., you're realizing very quickly that none of the maintenance items have ever been done because people have either been told there's no budget for it or whatever the case may be. So they're the next people being impacted on it because all of a sudden there's a shining light on them, certainly on HRBs under the Building Safety Act, saying, well, why haven't you been maintaining your fire doors? The whole, well, my boss said I couldn't spend any money on it. It's not a get out of jail free card. It's well, your role and responsibility is for this. So yeah,
So it's everyone in that hierarchy, like everyone in that ecosystem has been like
impacted upon.
Impacted in different ways, obviously not in the same way, but it has impacted everyone from the top of the hierarchy all the way to the down.
It sent a shockwave through the industry, and rightly so. I come from a construction background, and when you sit in a construction design team meeting, the person usually leading the charge is the principal contractor. They are the ones, this is what I'm going to build. So then when you look at what the individual consultants who are bringing to the table, fire engineers played a very small part in that conversation. They produced a compartmentation drawing, they wrote the fire strategy, never to be seen or heard from again. And then the architect would take up a lot of the decision making and things like that. So, and it's all about cost saving.
Is this maybe could be, because I want to go back to the simplifications
Yes.
or oversimplification of what we already have now. Do you think there's always a risk that simplification is seen as dumbing down. And how do you strike that balance between making things understandable and not diluting responsibility or legal obligation?
Absolutely. So how I approach it, and I'm not saying it's the right way. I approach that via humor. If you read any of my simplification guides, it's always got an underlying humor element about it. Now, the reason for that is psychology will always tell you, you'll always remember a good joke. Always remember a good joke. And they tend to be dad jokes, you know. So by using humor, what I'm doing is exposing the person to the information at it is a simple level. Look, this is what the law states. If you want to read it in far more complexity, it's there, go and read it. But in simple terms, this is why you've got to do it, and this is what the outcome would be. And there's a bit of humor in there to make it fun, not to make it too arduous, because when you're reading things, it can be quite depressing, quite grey. A cloud comes over you, you're having to read it, you'll read it 10 times because does that make sense to me? Whatever the case may be. So that's why I introduce humour in there. And I'm not trying to dilute it down and take away the overarching need. I'm just trying to make it a little bit more fun on that learning journey. Because that's what it is. We're all learning. Every day things change. There's about to be a change of PAS 9980 where it's going to be introduced into law. When you read the comments that are out there in the arena, lots of people oppose it. Lots of people are pushing back against it. And that's fair. There is no right or wrong answer, but there has to be a foundation for everybody to assess risk. In a health and safety perspective, you do a risk assessment and method statement. That's what the HSE asks for. That's why ultimately the BSR was parachuted into the health and safety executive, because they are used to risk assessments, method statements, and understanding mitigation. The problem you had was the people the other side not fully understanding the devil in the detail of what it takes to construct a project, because they're just coming at it from one perspective, which is health and safety. Whereas really to understand risk in the built environments under the Building Safety Act, you need to have built something in my mind, and not everybody going into that arena is going to have had the luxury of building something, liaising with consultants, getting the right level of detail, understanding design risk assessments, understanding Euro codes and how they feed into Part A of building regs, all these different moving parts that some people might never be exposed to, but they really need to have a reference to.
Do you think with clearer guidance that it actually increases accountability rather than reducing it?
I think so. Look, plausible deniability is a word that's thrown around all the time in lots of different industries. Well, I didn't know, so it's not my problem. And I'll use an analogy, and it's an old analogy. It takes a village to raise a child. And the village in this instance is the construction industry. And lots of the problems that were faced in construction were driven by the construction industry. And the drivers behind it was money. That, I'm butchering it. But it is about money. That's what it was always about. It's about getting things built as quickly as possible. And I'll give you an example. I won't name the principal contractor I was working for, but I was invited to a board meeting, and we were talking about an upcoming project. And what we had was a contract program that was presented to the client. The client signed off on it. That's what we was going to deliver. Then we had a construction program, and that construction program was our driver. That was for us to do better as a team to achieve. Well, based on that construction program, my managing director said, now you need to take 6 weeks off that. So you go, right? 6 weeks is a long time. So from a buildability perspective, you start going, well, where can I take 6 weeks from? Can't take it off a piling contractor because that individual's got curing times, drill depths, all these other things, piling mats that you've got to do. So it's not coming off that package. Can I take it off the ground worker? So very quickly you start looking around the packages of who can sacrifice time and what pressure you then put on them to deliver something. So then you're influencing human behaviors now, because your attitude is about saving time, which then influences their behavior and their attitude. So when you start to then get into complexities around defects, you can look at a facade on one elevation, perfect, pristine. You then look at the individual who delivered that, and they've spent clear time doing it. You go round the corner, and Joe Bloggs, which is his brother, who's being not really interested, is just there for the money at the end of each day, likes going to pub. And, I apologise to anyone who thinks I'm saying that's everyone. I'm not. I'm just saying the behaviours are different. That person has left defects behind because all they're interested in is getting it done, getting their day rate, getting their measure, whatever the driver is. Well, these behaviours are all stemmed from the principal contractor. They've the one who set the foundation, and they've probably said you need to get it done in this period. So that's that to me is the biggest concern. As a whole, as an industry, we have to come together. We have to say we've made mistakes. Mistakes have been made because of a financial decision. But what we now need to do to rectify it is make sure we have the right amount of time to deliver something, and we're not trying to win work because we're saying we can do it 12 weeks earlier than the person who's there. And these are the problems that still need to be ironed out in order to have what will be that panacea of delivery within the industry. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's one of those. It's a difficult one with time and money, and people are going to want things rushed through. But could time schedules be set where they have to be completed in a certain time, but without compromise? It's a tricky one.
Look, for me, think of a principal contractor. And I'll probably get shot by a lot of principal contractors if they listen to this. A principal contractor is a managing agent. Most principal contractors don't deliver or build anything. They manage the process. It's a project management process. And what really should happen is you are looking to build a 100-story building. So there's key moving parts in there that need to be right. The foundations, concrete frame, or however you're building it. Those specialist core practitioners are the ones who should be telling you it's going to take this level of time. And the reason for it is because of this, and this. And I want within my package a robust quality assurance that protects my PI. That's what I'm ultimately going to do. I'm protecting myself so that over the latent defect period, over the life cycle of the building, I'm not exposed to any claims. And this is what it looks like. And the managing agent should really, or the principal contractor should really listen to that, because ultimately they're being protected by the subcontractors and the contractors. Because if they're protected, the managing agent, the principal contractor is protected. So there has to be and everybody talks about it, upfront engagement as early as possible with all parties to discuss the project, to identify risk and iron out the problems. Well, your biggest risk on any project is time. It's then quality. It's then cost. And these are the conversations that don't necessarily happen enough. They're starting to happen. Use Crossrail as an example. Crossrail has gone from it'll cost you 20 pence and a packet of curly whirlies to deliver. It's now my children paying for it in their tax when they grow up, and their kids paying for it in their tax when they grow up. And then when you start to look at the project, lots of complexities, land buying, tunnelling, things like that. but our nation was built on railways. It's not a new thing that somebody's come up with. Brunel built some of the best railway infrastructure in this country. He had more time to deliver them because of the timescales, and they were infrastructure projects paid for by the government. Well, so is Crossrail. The difference is everybody's got the answer to do it right, and nobody's taken the upfront time and said, right, let's plan this properly. So, but anyway, I digress.
No, it's one of them. It makes clear sense. Non-negotiables in contracts for timeframes. If you've got professionals that know how long things are going to take, why rush them to have something which may not work down the line?
Money. It's money because it is money, because if you rush, it's all about time is money. That's the statement. All those time is money, and if you give someone more time, that means more money. So how do you save money? You give them less time, but obviously that, as all of us know, it affects the entirety of every project, whether it's big or small. Even if it's a simple single story extension, still affects it.
Absolutely.
But
And
take the time to do it right first. You're not going to be back paying even more money, are we? That's the problem. It's always going to be a circle, and it's until it's broken and it's just done, to expectations.
I use lots of the old analogies. Buy cheap, you pay twice. It's that simple. Someone's coming to the table and you've got 3 tenders in front of you, and tender A and tender B are very close together, but tender C is miles away from both of them at the reduced end of it. I would look at that and I would say, I'm opening myself up to lots of risk here. Massive amounts of risk. There's no assurity here. They might have a very good track record of delivering things, but there's a gap. There's a massive gap there. And there isn't the right answer is take your time. Do not rush anything. Walk through the problems, role play the problems, ask the key questions: who, what, where, when, how, and why. If you ask those questions of everybody, you get all the right answers. And when the industry comes together and starts pushing back against the money people, whether it's a bank financing or whether it's an individual client financing, and saying, we can only deliver what you want in the timescale that you want for this value, no less, no more. And if everybody, certainly within the major contracting group, had that mindset, instead of trying to undercut or just get turnover, then the world will deliver better product. And there's other key factors missing from that. Quality doesn't go away. It's always there. And taking that pride in what you deliver. When you start putting time pressures on people, you're taking away the time for quality and getting things right. Well, there used to be a gatekeeper within the industry, which was the clerk of the works. And the clerk of the works had the power on the project to tell a party not to close up a wall, not to finish something until they were happy. But what that did is then put constraints on time. So then it was well, we don't need that. We'll get the individuals to self-police and self-monitor.
Still happens today. Still happening today. You go on site as a building inspector, and you leave. They already close everything up when you already pointed out that something may not have looked as it should, or looks incorrect or incomplete. But like you said, there's no clerk of works. It's done. It's finished. It's boarded on. Done.
Exactly. And then when you've got things like the latent defect period, for defects in facades, it's been extended to 30 years on some principles, but it tends to be 14 years. Well, that kind of protects someone where you get a principal contractor, a floor starts to raise, it's in the latent defect period, they'll go and sort it. Whereas actually what you've got to say is, well, what's the causation? It was the causation because we just rushed at it and we didn't apply the right tackifier or whatever the case may be. What was the failure? and then take on board that lessons learned, which is, again, it's a lovely buzzword that lots of people throw around on projects. Lessons learned, lessons learned. How many people go to an end of project, lessons learned, and you talk through warts and all, these are the problems we faced, and this is the causation, and this is the impact that it caused to the overall project. The reason things like that don't happen is because people are afraid that it then turns into a commercial argument where you've probably got sub EA being bashed over the head by the principal contractor. They've not administered the contract properly, so they've had money taken off them, whatever. So they're literally like, I just want to get away from this project as quickly as possible. Again, that's leading to defects and things like that. And then they might not survive that process because they go bust. I haven't got the answers, but what I do know is that behaviours of what and attitudes of what has got us to this position in the industry. I use it's called the Batari box. And basically, it's my attitude influences my behavior, which influences your attitude and then your behavior. And it's a full circle thing. And ultimately, if everybody thinks about how they're engaging with other parties and having grown-up conversations, not an argument, a grown-up conversation, we'll be in a better place. You know, another analogy, everybody wants honesty, but nobody wants to hear the truth. Well, if you ask me a direct question, I'm going to say to you, I can't do it in that time. What do you mean you can't do it in that time? I'm telling you, I can't do it in that time. By the time I've done A, B, C, D, E, and F, there's 4 weeks. Then by the time we then go through that process, there's another 4 weeks. You want me to do it in 2 weeks' time? I'm just throwing resource at the problem, and that's not the answer. I need people to look at the devil in the detail. So, yeah, I haven't got the answers, but we all need to come together and find what that panacea is. And I think a big problem, just circling back to some of the points you raised, Jack, was everybody's now looking to what government wants us to do. But that shouldn't be the way. When you put government in charge of things, it stops things from happening. We're already seeing that. We have slowed down in building, and we should actually be going the other way. We've got building regulations in place that state that you cannot use, or you have to use in certain scenarios, materials of limited combustibility. Right, okay. Well, we know that through Grenfell, Kingspan and others lied about their product data. We know that. It's there. It's in the public arena. So the due diligence from the designer is put challenge on the supplier. Right, you want me to use this insulation, prove that it's been through a test, show me the data, let me look at it, I want to understand it. So before I include it within my design, I've got confidence that it is what it says on the tin. Things like that. And then we, as a group, feed back into government and say, these are the problems that we're finding. And this is the regulation that will stop that from happening. So you can remove some of the dodgy people from the industry who are just there to make money, and make engineers and construction professionals' life and risk assessors' lives easier.
This episode is sponsored by Plan Checker. Across building control and the wider construction sector, one issue keeps coming up: capacity. The work is there, the responsibility is huge, and the pressure keeps increasing. Plan Checker was built to help bridge that gap by making it easier to access independent, appropriately qualified professionals when support is genuinely needed. Whether that's for plan reviews, consultancy input, or specialist advice. It doesn't change statutory responsibility, and it doesn't interfere with regulatory rules. It simply helps people find expertise without relying on informal networks or last-minute phone calls. If you want to see how that works in practice, visit planchecker.co.uk.
So we touched earlier on some of the roles in the legislation, which are now clearly defined. We've got like the PAPs, the APs, the BSMs. but confusion still seems quite widespread. Where do you see people most commonly misunderstanding their role?
I think the most misunderstood role is the responsible person role under the regulatory reform order.
Okay.
That itself as a role is crucial to the life safety of the building. So the fire safety. Now, when we go and look at buildings from a Clark Banks perspective, the first item that I'm asking from the managing agent, the client, whoever it may be, have you got a fire strategy? Show me your building fire strategy. Show me the cause and effect of how this building should operate in a fire scenario. And the amount of individuals who are going, well, we haven't got one. Well, let's start there. Let's do a retrospective fire strategy. I need to understand, was the building built in accordance with approved document B? Or was engineered judgment applied via BS 9991 or BS 9999 in whatever scenario? So I can understand when I'm walking travel distances, I can go, well, this travel distance is far greater than what approved document B at the time of construction asked for. Forget now, because obviously it's at the time of construction or the time of occupancy. So you're looking at that and then you're saying, well, all right, those travel distances are supported by exceeded and supported by sprinklers, AOVs in the corridors, cross corridor compartmentation, whatever's been introduced, but at least you are physically seeing that when you walk through the building. And that's, again, the only way you can really understand is touch, feel and taste. A lot of people do it as a desktop. We don't. We go, I'll review your desktop information, but then I need to go and understand this building, because this strategy tells me, and this is another issue, it's got written on it for construction. Okay, brilliant. So when was it up-revved as built? Has it been up-revved as built? Is it reflecting what was built? Because I've been to buildings and the fire strategies told me that I'm going to come across an AOV and it isn't there. And I'm going, well, on the floor plan, it tells me it's here. And then I'm starting to look around going, well, I don't understand why it's gone. And then the buildability kicks in and I go, well, the reason it's not there is because they've given more floor space to the apartment rather than losing it to the corridor. And then the question then is, well, how are you justifying this travel distance? What else has been applied? Lots of things like that. And this is where the responsible person, any risk assessment, let's use health and safety. There's a number of reasons why risk assessments must be reviewed. Review them annually just to make sure they're still valid. Change is driven by something changes in the building. Something changes in the operation that you're doing. Legislation changes. You add something, or there's new mitigations, whatever the case may be. And that's the responsible person's duty on an asset. That's what they should do. Keep the document relevant and live. And obviously now what you've got is building safety case reports, which is about fire and structure for the PAP. And everybody's thinking, well, that now supersedes what the responsible person's duties are. It doesn't. The responsible person still has all these other articles, whether it be Article 9, etc., of the regulatory reform order, of duties they must do, maintain, train, or, make sure competency is there. That is the biggest gap at this moment in time in the market, people understanding their roles under that. And that's why my simplifying the role of the responsible person is going to be put out on LinkedIn today. That's a core factor. They're the one who are managing the day-to-day, the cause and effect, making sure that everything should do what it says on the tin in regards to the fire strategy. Because if your fire risk assessment cuts across what the fire strategy says, there's a compliance issue there. And it needs to be captured. So you need to then revisit that document.
Gareth, looking ahead, clarity over noise now. Yeah. Looking forward, do you think the industry is genuinely moving towards clarity, or are we still layering new guidance on top of old confusion?
Absolutely. What we are doing is compounding an issue instead of, let's start with what we already know. You know, you don't invent the wheel. It goes round. What you invent on that wheel is a new type of alloy that makes it look pristine, etc., etc. So I think it's been a knee jerk. It's been a reaction to a fire. There's been death, which absolutely could have, been prevented. So what really the reset should have been is, what aren't we doing that's already in place? Let's start with fixing that before we introduce anything else that's new. Because what'll happen is people will focus on the new shiny stuff and they won't deal with the foundation stuff that should be right. And that's where I think we've gone wrong. And it'll eventually, as Jack said, everything's cyclical. It will come round to that point. But unfortunately, let's use the regulatory reform order as an example. It will take somebody to be prosecuted under that for it then to be highlighted of what must be done under that. So you're waiting for a reaction instead of pragmatically, proactively saying, right, we're all chasing SCEB, where the focus is on skills, knowledge, education, behavior, experience, etc., etc., to justify why somebody can be a fire engineer, a structural engineer. But that also goes for a responsible person, for a PAP, for an AP. You know, you've got individuals who own a high-rise building and the law, you're now the PAP. Well, I live in Switzerland. All I do is give money to do it. Doesn't matter. You're the PAP. The entity, the company you formed in the UK, Joe Bloggs Limited, that's developed that high-rise building, now defines that as you being the PAP. So straight away they're going, I know nothing about that. How do I discharge my duties? What do I do? So that we're compounding, and we should have done a reset and looked at what we already do, looked at the behaviours already within industry before then introducing something else new for people to focus on. Because again, that by design is diluting what people should already be doing, their roles and responsibilities, because you're bolting on something new and they're going, well, I can't look at this. I've got to go over here and look at that. It's caused the pressure. It will ease, but then it'll come round again when other incidents happen, etc., etc.
Yeah, it is an unusual one with being reactive to then make a change. Similar to building regulations, where there has to usually be some form of disaster for them to take notice and change something, which, well, why are we not doing more clearer reviews of the guidance to, is it working? I know there are some consultations ongoing, but should this not have really been thought out a long time ago to make sure that a lot of things are up to date and relevant to how we're actually doing things? But
well, you make a very good point, Jack, and approved document A. You know, it took a structural collapse of a building, which is a big focus within the building safety case, for approved document A to be born around the structural side of a project. So at that point, there was a disaster. People then reacted, and now you've got the no longer these lightweight concrete structures being built because they form risk, etc., etc. But actually, everybody talks about modular, doing things quicker. We'll always come back to time. So off-site construction, use lightweight construction to get things up quicker, because ultimately we want to save time and money. When you look at old structures, so let's use Nada, where you're from. We, as a collective, the human psyche, we are still perplexed how the pyramids were built. Absolutely perplexed. There is not an engineer.
We're the same.
Yeah, exactly. There is not an engineer on. There's not an engineer on this planet who can categorically hang their hat on, I know exactly how the pyramids were built.
No.
I don't care what anyone says. So
No.
when you look at structures that were built properly, you understand that the right materials were used for the type of building that you were building. Jack, you're from the same neck of the woods as me, Liverpool. You look at the old cathedral in Liverpool, and when you read the history around how long it took to build that, you realise 3 generations of one family were invested in building that. So Joe Bloggs was the original stonemason. His son then took on the mantle, and then his son then finished it. And then you realise time was taken to build it properly. And when all the houses around it fall down, that cathedral will still be stood there in another 500 years because it was built properly. And that's, that's what we've got to do. We've got to say, right, how do we build something properly? What is the right product to use it? But unfortunately, influences around carbon neutral and all these other things are being thrown into the mix, and people are going, well, if we do it out of lightweight plastic, we'll get it built quicker. Yeah, but plastic melts and burns. Doesn't matter. We'll get people in there quicker. These are the decisions that have been made, and somebody's gone, sounds good to me. The wrong people making the wrong decisions, and I just want to put something in there before you ask the question. It comes back to government. It's coming out that the delegislation of building regs, etc., fed into Grenfell. I'll use 2 analogies for where government are very good at putting policies and procedures in place, but very poor at managing things. One is the privatisation of water industry. We were joining Europe and aligning ourselves with Europe in the early 90s around bathing water quality. So what that meant is that the discharge of sewage into our seas had to be limited, controlled and treated. And for a very long time, and a lot of people realised that, human waste was put on barges, sailed out into international waters and dumped. Fish stocks went through the roof. But scientists then started to look at our diets and went, hang on, we've got loads of microplastics in our food, which is in our body, and it's having genetic impact on our genome. That's going to have the same on fish stocks. We need to stop doing that. We need to stop dumping human waste because it's coming back full circle. So certain protocols were put in place. Anyway, I won't go too much into depth. There was a water treatment plant in Cornwall, not too far from where I live, that a tanker driver drove in, and he was carrying a aluminium sulfate product to dump into the raw water supply to help the treatment process for what would then eventually be the drinking water for that area. When that tanker driver, which was an agency driver, arrived on site, his briefing was, you'll come into site, there's a chamber, there's 2 chambers side by side. You've got to dump the product in the chamber with the sign on it. Drove into site, set off, the sign's on the floor. Doesn't know which inlet he needs to put it in. So he dumped it in, and it's not his fault. He's doing what he said. No mobile phones in those days, nobody to call on. Dumped the aluminium sulfate into the clean water side that had already been treated, which meant the populace of that Cornish village started to drink contaminated water, which led to deaths, birth defects, even to this day. The then Conservative government went, this is a risk we're going to carry for generations. We need to privatise this industry. Hence, water privatisation was born. And every water company in the country was awarded funding from the government to achieve bathing water standards, except South West Water, which was the culprit. Well, it wasn't South West Water in those days, but when it became South West Water, they were punished and had to go to the bank and get the money themselves because they'd caused the problem. So government offset, get rid of it all, make it private issue. What's just happened with the post office? The Horizon scandal, where people for years were saying this computer software is causing problems. It was ignored because money had already been invested into it. So what happened? Another Conservative government then went, we need to get rid of the post office. Privatising it is the best way forward. It will make the British taxpayer lots of money. Well, it was sold for 3 times under its value to just get it off the books. And now what you have are all of the reports coming out of people who had took their own lives ruined, lost of everything because of this software that was forced upon people. So what I'm saying is government has a role to help build policy and procedure, but when it comes to them managing, they're not very good at it. Not very good at it at all. That's where the construction industry needs to take back control. The independent regulator must be that, but it must be serviced from people who know how to build things and they understand the risk. And a lot of people don't realise a lot of the BSR officers are repurposed environmental health officers from local authority who don't have a great deal of building knowledge. They touch building knowledge on health and safety and things like that. But you're putting them out of their comfort zone to make decisions on building something. Can't be done. That's why you've got huge conglomerate consultancies supporting the BSR and decision making. And they only have a finite amount of resource. So the bottleneck has been created because you've got people who don't understand the level of risk and the resource there is at its capacity. So yeah, it's a problem that isn't going to be solved overnight. But we as an industry have got to wrestle back that control and got to be not lobbying government, but saying to the BSR, if you do this, we can at least start building. Doing the foundations, doing the concrete frame of a HRB, and making sure that the foundations stand up to Eurocode, approved document A, etc., etc., and the concrete frame has been designed in accordance with Eurocode, etc., etc. At least let us get that out the ground whilst we go through the other gateway items in regards to, travel distances, all these other CFD modelling. We'd be building, because whilst that's happening, whilst the construction phase is happening, you can spend time on the design and make sure it's right and make sure you get rid of the risk instead of having this hard stop where everybody's going, I've got nothing to do. And now you've got people going, well, I ain't going to bother building in the UK because it's going to take me 50 weeks to get approval to build something. Well, I could have got the building built in 52 weeks. So anyway, I digress, chaps.
So for our thousands and thousands, even millions of listeners, what thing would you like them to take away from the conversation today?
Well, it is the Joe Rogan podcast for building regs. What I think there's a number of things I'd like people to take away. Number one, don't be discouraged by the industry. As a culture, we've traditionally in the UK and in other parts of the world, we've built some amazing buildings and we've been involved in some amazing infrastructure things. Human behavior will always make mistakes. So don't let what's happening and the noise around it discourage you from joining the industry. So that's got to be the positive. We need more people. We need people who think differently. Brunel didn't have a degree. He didn't have a degree. So everybody's focusing on everyone must have a degree. You must do that. I disagree. There are some very practical minded people out there who understand construction, geometry, physics far better than those who have got doctorates, etc., because it's just the way their brain works. You might have heard of the word of a savant. A savant is somebody who's described being on the autistic spectrum, but are very, very, mostly mathematically brilliant. They can solve problems instantaneously, whereas I've got 10 calculators in front of me and it's all giving me different numbers. They are on it. So that's the type of people we need to encourage into the industry and not deter based on the fact of they haven't got a degree. Because let's be honest, not everybody wants to burden themselves with a degree. You pay £13,000 upwards for a degree, and actually you're burdened for a very long time to then pay that back, which then deters people because they don't want to move into industry and earn the money that triggers the payback. But we're getting into a political thing there. So that's number one. Don't be deterred, come into the industry. Something else I'd like people to take away. Don't be afraid to push back. don't be afraid if you have an idea to put it forward to streamline, improve, and add benefit to the industry. We are dealing with lots of things we've done for millennia that we've been doing. Doesn't make them right, but the fact that most of it is still being done means that's probably a good practice. But if you can come up with a way of improving, then do it. Speak up. Don't be afraid. Add benefit. Don't be a drone. Don't sit there and wait for somebody to tell you what to do. Look for ways to improve, because again, that's what the industry needs. It needs that collective mindset where people are going, do you know what? If we did this, that would streamline that and would make it far more efficient. Don't add bureaucracy, because that just takes away time, but use simple skill sets and improve on that. A lot of people don't know what Prince 2 is. Prince 2 is a very good project management framework. And when I've talked to clients and other consultants about Prince 2, they glaze over. And I say, well, these are some very good project controls. If you introduce to your project, would save you time, but protect you losing cost, etc. So don't be afraid. Put your head above the parapet. There's no such thing as a stupid question. It's the idiot who gives you the answer. That's the way you've got to look at things. And unfortunately, society is about shouting down at people. We've got to be more flexible than that. And one way I have an idea to improve this was, we've got lots of bodies, Regs, Institute of Fire Engineers, the Institute of Clerk of the Works, etc., etc. And then you have the Construction Industry Council. Well, for me, the Construction Industry Council should be the people driving betterment. That should be the body. And that body should really be made up of peer-voted members from Regs, MCIOB, Institute of Fire Safety Managers, etc., etc. And that board should be made up of people, not just long-serving people from that awarding body, but from people who have good, pragmatic ideas to bring the industry forward and keep taking that leap. If you achieve that, everybody's being heard and nobody's being shouted down. And, you know, certainly within the fire arena, everybody's been doing what I refer to as the reverse breaststroke with resource. Gather up as much resource as I can so I can pretend I can deliver all of these changes to legislation. And then what happens is they then start to filter through that resource, getting rid of the people who are not that good, keeping the people who can write a report in a day, etc., etc. Well, that's not fair. You know, everybody's different. You have to work with people. People buy people first. So if you work with an individual and understand their history, sorry,
Bless
that
you.
person might not be very good at their role because somebody has micromanaged them to death, and that behaviour's influenced their attitude to work, and they've not been able to bring ideas forward because they've been told, not interested in what you've got to say, this is what we delivered, that's what the product looks like, you've got to do it in 5 days. That's not fair. You're taking away the human element. You're cookie cuttering what should have personable influence and understanding of what the problem is. That's what it should be. So I would say, 1, don't be discouraged. 2, speak up. Be a market disruptor. Be a person who has got ideas and don't be afraid to share them. Some of them might fall by the wayside, but that little golden gem might change something for the better for everybody.
True. Gareth, there is something that we should have thanked you for right from the start. You've mentioned you've been in the Navy, so what was it? The Royal Navy, yes.
Royal Navy, yes. I served on what was called Type 42 destroyers. So
thank you for
I won't go
your
into
service.
too much.
Yeah, but we just
don't need to
saying
thank me.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
service that for the country, for the people of the country. So obviously, thank you for that. The time that you've given. This is time. This is your time that you've dedicated to that. So thank you for that. Thank you for a thoughtful, grounded, honest, open, transparent conversation. I cannot find enough words, but yeah, it was all of these. It wasn't loud. It wasn't scary. It was just perfect. It was clear. That's how I would put it. And thank you for your time today. Really, really appreciate it. And I'm sure a lot of people would enjoy listening to this podcast. Jack.
I hope so, and thank you both for the opportunity and the time. It's good that a lot of people are embracing this new media approach, and this is a lessons learned as far as I'm concerned. This is what this platform is. You're talking to people and everybody's learning, and everybody learns in different ways, whether it's reading, whether it's listening to an audio book or listening to a podcast. But it's got to be encouraged. You've got to keep the grey matter ticking over, and it sparks debate. And that's something I would say to all of the listeners. Having an argument is not a debate. Having an argument is making sure that your point is the one that's heard and doesn't make you right. That's an ego-driven response. You have to drop your ego and you have to use an old analogy. Every day's a school day. You've got to be open. Like Bruce Lee said, be like water. Water will form any vessel that it's applied to. Make sure that's you in your day-to-day life. Apply yourself to every situation and listen to everybody's point of view. Don't be encouraged by somebody else's perception. Always have your own point of view and be clear that this is why I feel this way. And the minute you do that and apply it to everyday life, whether it's your profession or whether it's your personal life, your existence will be better. It'll be more positive. It will bring more benefit and more opportunity to your life.
Thank you very much.
Gareth,
thanks
for joining us today. And
thank you
I'm
both.
sure we're both looking forward to the next release of your ebook, which you'll be able to find on LinkedIn, Gareth Grimes. Perfect. Thank you very much for today.
Thank you, guys.
Gents, enjoy the rest of your day. Have a good rest of the week.
You too. This episode of Behind the Regs is sponsored by Plan Checker. Plan Checker is a UK-based digital platform designed to connect clients with verified building control and construction professionals, making it easier to find the right expertise at the right time for the right job. It doesn't replace building control bodies and it doesn't carry out restricted activities or functions. It simply creates clearer, more transparent access to the professionals working across the industry. If you're a professional, a client, or part of the wider built environment sector, you can learn more or sign up at planchecker.co.uk.